All right. So tonight's lesson is topic 4.17, Daily Agent Accountability Summary, DD Form 2665. And again, this form has worked very similar to the 2657. We're going to go through each one of these line items, but your notes and your skills that you did on the previous modules should help you here. Our enabling objective, 4.46, audit at 2665, in accordance with the volume 5. And our reference, of course, is the volume 5. That being said, we're going to use the old DoD FMR volume 5. The new one does not have the breakdown of each one of the line items. So when it comes to you are referencing, trying to figure out what goes on which line, you will use the old DoD FMR volume 5. Our discussion points. The DD Form 2665 overview, balancing turn-in of funds negotiable instruments, section 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the 2665, and then we'll roll into summary and review. So mainly we're going to go over the form, and we're going to talk about how it's a little bit different than the 2657. All right, this form is completed by an agent. So that could be a deputy dispersing officer, it could be a cashier, any of the agents that are listed in the DoD FMR Volume 5, or anybody that has been appointed to handle the cash, except for the dispersing officer. They will use the 2657. So this 2665 is intended to be a complete snapshot of the agent's accountability. So it is like in the 2657, it was an aggregate of the entire day. The 2665 will also be an aggregate of the entire day. So you will not have individual transactions showing on there or broken down separately in section 1 or 2. It, of course, needs to be in permanent ink, and the dispersing officer must audit this form whenever it is turned in. And it can be generated by the system. So it is not required to be done manually. What questions do we have so far? All right, easy enough. Balance turn-in of funds and negotiable instruments. So this is where it's a little bit different than the 2657. The dispersing officer doesn't have anybody to turn it into except for mailing in deposits or depositing it with the bank. The deputy or other agents, on the other hand, have to deposit their funds with the dispersing officer. That has to be done at least monthly, to also include the last day of each month. If the dispersing officer suspects irregularities have occurred, so if they think an agent handled transaction incorrectly, or maybe they just don't have a good feeling about the agent's level of knowledge, they can go in and have the agent deposit with them so they can audit the records. And if the agent is going to go on leave, they're going to be absent for 5 or more days, then they'll have to do a balance and turn in of funds at that point in time. If they are doing a turn in of funds, what form do they use to complete that? So they'll, of course, have this 2665, but there's another form that they will complete to document everything that they're turning in.
Is that the 1081, sir?
It is. Spot on. Thank you. All right. Now we're going to go into the form. So if everybody can go ahead and open up the DD form 2665. So this will be under your resources. And just let me know in the chat when you have it open. All right, it looks like everybody has it open. So I want you to go ahead and focus on the 2665. At the top, you'll see Daily Agent Accountability Summary, and then the date. And of course, that date is whatever date that you are doing the transaction. Similar to the 2657, this document has a section 1, a section 2, section 3, and then on the second page, you'll see a section 5 or 4, belay my last. Also, like the 2657, you'll see that there's a column that says today and cumulative in section 1. And in section 2, you'll see accountability before transfers, returns to principal. And so that means that it is being returned to the dispersing officer, and accountability after the transfer. Section 3 is if that agent has other agents beneath them. Don't worry about that section. And section 4 is where all the transactions are detailed. As you'll see on the slide, not cumulative for the entire accounting period. And that's a major difference between the 2657 and the 2665. So what that means is it is cumulative in between each time that you deposit with the dispersing officer if you're the agent. So you'll do transactions for 3 days and then you deposit with the dispersing officer. Your cumulative will restart at that point after the deposit is done. So each day in between deposits, that will continue to aggregate. And then when you do the deposit, it will reset your cumulative. Does that make sense for everybody? All right, I don't
Yes,
hear
sir.
anything. All right, moving on to line 1. Line 1 is the accountability at the beginning. If you had previous transactions and you closed out previous days, then you would have your ending accountability from that previous day, your line 15, and that would be your new day one or new line one for the new day. So very similar to the 2657. Line 2 refers to advances. So say the deputy has a threshold of $2,000. They're not allowed to have more than that. What the dispersing officer can do is they can provide the deputy with a check that the deputy can later cash to get more working cash. Or this line can also be used if the dispersing officer is giving the deputy more cash. So say that they came in the morning, they say, "Hey, dispersing officer, I need an extra $1,500. Can you provide me that for the day?" And that would be displayed right here on line 2. Again, the preposition check is just the check that is written in advance, so the agent can go ahead and cash that if they run out of cash. And that's good to have in place if you, as a dispersing officer, want to go on leave or for some reason aren't going to be available. Other would be foreign currency, not typically used. Line 3 is our vouchered collection. So who can tell me what forms are associated with voucher collections?
$11.31.
So 1131 is our primary cash collection form. So that would be an unvouchered collection. So our voucher collections are 1149 from retail operations and our 1359 from food service. So these are voucher collections with the 1149 or the 1359 to accompany them. Typically, you would see this only at the end of the month. Our line 4 is our treasury check issues. So that is any check that's been issued by the deputy. Just a reminder, cashiers cannot issue checks. Some examples that would go on that would be vouchered payments, as well as an exchange for cash check. So, like in class, we did MWR gives us cash and wants a check. That would go on this line. So this is a little different because this is aggregated together, where on the 2657 it is not. Line 5 is not used by Navy deputies. And line 6 is an exchange gain accumulation. And that's just simply on there for rounding changes in foreign currency. So you bought it at a certain price, and then when you go to do some sort of exchange days or weeks later, it has changed, and you have a gain or a loss based on that. What questions do we have so far? All right, nothing heard, so moving on. We're still in section 1, and we're going over line 7. So line 7 would be our unvouchered collections. So that would include the 1131 from food service and retail ops. We'd also have our 1017 golfs. Another thing for line 7 is our cash overage. So if we're over on cash, that will show up here. Again, this is an increase in accountability in lines 1 through 7. And so that's why it's cash overage and not cash shortage as well. Then line 8 is simply the sum of lines 2 through 7. And then line 9 is simply line 1 plus line 8. So essentially line 9 is lines 1 through 8. And that wraps up our section 1 accountability increases. All right, line 10 starts off our decreases in accountability in section 1. And so line 10 is our transfer to other dispersing agent. So this could be a dispersing or a deputy dispersing officer, a deputy agent, an agent, a cashier, a pay agent. All of those are options for this line. Line 11 is just like our exchange gain accumulations, but it is for our loss. So if we have losses due to rounding on foreign exchange, this is where that would go. And there's a whole lot of forms that goes on with this. I promise you there will not be a math problem on this on the test. Line 12 is not listed on the PowerPoint, but is for cash shortages. Very similar to line 7. That was our cash overage. This is our cash shortage. Now, line 13 is a little unique. So this is our section where the agent will annotate their return to the dispersing officer. So you'll see that they can be depositing vouchers that they paid. If they made a deposit or prepared a deposit, there'll be a deposit ticket and other. So other is where you would put cash. So if you were turning in $2,000 to the dispersing officer, it would go on 13 Charlie. And then our line 14, our total decreases is simply lines 10 through 13. And our accountability ending, our line 15 is line 9, our gross accountability, minus line 14, our total decrease. Any questions on section 1 so far?
Sir, Anson Rakundo, I think I have the wrong form because I don't think I'm following properly. Do you mind sharing the form you have so I can follow along?
So can you all see this form on my screen? This is what it should look like.
No, sir, we're only seeing your PowerPoint.
All right, this is what the form should look like.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. All right, moving on to section 2. Actually, give me just a sec. All right, section 2 is the agent's accountability distribution. And again, this is very similar to the 2657. Your line Charlie, or your column Charlie, is your accountability before transfers. And so your returns to principal, if you have something on line 13 in section 1, whether that's vouchers, deposit ticket, or cash, it will be subtracted here in column delta. And then column echo will be your Charlie minus delta equals echo. All right, line 17. Most of these lines in the bottom aren't used. So that's good for us. Less work to do, less things to remember. So our line 17, US coin and currency. So that's our cash on hand. Line 19 is our pre-position checks. Line 20 is our undeposited cash checks. So if you're doing business with somebody and you cash their check, that means that you have not deposited it with the disbursing officer. Then we're going to skip all the way down to paid vouchers, line 23. So if you paid out of voucher payment, then it will go on line 23. Again, that's probably going to be accompanied with a SF-1034 or some supporting documentation. Line 25 is our funds with subagents. So if you are the deputy dispersing officer and you have an agent beneath you or a deputy agent or pay agent, this is where you will put how much they have on there. Line 26 is the value of funds deposited. So you have a deposit ticket from where you made a deposit, and that needs to be deposited with the dispersing officer. Line 27, bad checks. So dishonored checks receivable. Line 29 is our loss of funds by agent. So if cash goes missing, it will show up here on line 29. So all that will total up line 16 through 31, and that will equal our total agent accountability. Our line 32 will equal our line 9 Charlie. So that's our gross accountability. And just like on the 2657, we should have a balance between all of our sections. And again, if you do a turn in, you need to take into account column D, and that will change your column E. If you have agents, and so that would be your line 25, funds with subagents, it would be broken down in columns 33 through 37. So that's your entire section 3. And below that, you have name of agent. So whoever is filling that out, in this case, it would be, we'll just say our deputy, the address of the agent, and then the signature. And that closes out section 3. Section 4 says not required, completed at the discretion of the dispersing officer, but it's a space to be able to annotate what goes on with all your transactions. Now, you will have supporting documentation for all of these things anyway. If I was a dispersing officer, I would have the agent fill it out just to give me additional clarity. So I don't have to sort through all of their documentation to make sure everything is correct. I can just look at it right here and see a snapshot of everything they've done. And this would be broken down by individual transactions, so it gives you a lot more clarity. All right, what questions do we have about section 2 or section 3 or section 4? All right, if you go to the DoD FMR Volume 5, there is an example of 4 days consecutively. And it is figure 115 tack 1. And so I like to have people work through this if they need additional explanation. And they did fill out section 4 on these, and that will give you an idea of how that additional information helps you walk through each one of the transactions. It's very hard to audit this form if you don't have a complete breakdown of everything that was done. And again, section 4 provides that. In addition to that, we have pages in the red book, and that is page 81 through 83. Right. If y'all don't have any more questions for me, I have some questions for you. When must an agent prepare a DD Form 2665?
At least monthly, sir.
At least monthly. And when else?
Whenever there is suspicion or an overarching need to do so.
Absolutely. Anybody else have some other reasons?
5 days of leave.
Absolutely. And I think there is one more that I can think of. The last one was Well, just no frequently than monthly, and then the last day of each month. So if you were to audit it sometime in the middle of the month, while that does hit the no less frequently than monthly, you still have to audit them at the end of the month. What effect does collection from ship store have on an agent's accountability? So this is
That would be an
asking,
increase in accountability.
absolutely. So that would go on their section 1, summary of daily accountability transactions, voucher collections, and that increases in accountability. What section of the DD form 2665 shows all assets in agent's accountability?
Is it section 2?
Absolutely. So section 2 is the distribution of agent accountability by title. So it's just talking about where the assets are. Are they with a sub agent? Are they in transit? Did you do a deposit ticket? So was it actually deposited? So yes, it is the distribution of where your assets are. What section of DD Form 2665 is the Memorandum of Agent Accountability?
Section 4?
Absolutely. Apparently it is optional, but I would definitely encourage you to do it because it allows you to do a complete audit and run through each one of the transactions. Without this, it's kind of you're taking it everything at an aggregate level, and it's very hard to interpret what's on the form. All right. So in summary, we talked about the 2665 with the overview. So we talked about the header, we talked about each one of the sections and the columns. We talked about section 1, the summary of transactions, section 2, how the assets are distributed, section 3, which is your money with subagents or your accountability with subagents, and section 4, your memorandum agent accountability, which is a breakdown of all your transactions. So what questions do you all have for this evening? All right. I know that was a quick run through of this, but again, it is very similar to the 2657. It does take some reps and sets to get used to because it is formatted slightly different. But I think if you go through that homework and look at that volume 5, figure 1-5 tack 1, you'll easily catch on to how this form works. But if you don't have any questions for me, I'm going to stay on until this meeting forces me out in 3 minutes and 5 seconds. So I'll just be hanging out waiting for your questions.
Thank you, sir.